like this. And cow is like this. Then you think of a cow, and then you worship cow. Supposing you bring the cow in front of you, that's called Vedanta. नहीं जी, डॉगमा का मतलब दो मत भी नहीं है, वो नहीं. डॉगमा का मतलब सिंपली इज अ मैटर फॉर, इट्स अ मैटर ऑफ बिलीफ. डॉगमा सिंपली सुपरस्टिशन. हाँ, that is all right. But the definition of dogma is some joker's thinking. It is not even a matter for debate. It is straight away wrong. Where the truth is, supposing, that becomes a matter for debate only when you are talking about the evident. If you are talking about the unevident something, that is a dogma, then there is no matter for debate. It's a matter for belief. What Vedanta says, people can debate and find out what it is all about. That is all, because it's talking about the evident. Even though fundamentally there is no need for debate, because it's just pointing out the evident. But if you have a doubt, you can always debate. That is all right. Inside the Shastra. Inside the Shastra, you can have vichara. But dogmas are all just, just beliefs. Unverifiable beliefs. Okay. Yeah. So, we are doing Yatha Saumya, this we have to see. Kena prakarena hi e bhagavaha sa adesho bhavati iti. We have seen that. See here, there are two things. How is it possible? Akshepa. How is it possible means I would like to know the prakara, I would like to know the methodology, the method by which how one can know everything by knowing one. How? What is the logic? What is the logic? What is the logic? Here the logic is given here. This is the method. This is very important. In this manner, one can know everything by knowing that one thing because of this reason. What is the reason? There is a source-creation relation. This source-creation relation, or the truth-appearance relation, source-creation relation, Ishvara-Maya relation, is what facilitates the knowledge of everything by way of knowing the one. That is the Panch. It is this that is not known to man. This is something that is available for observation. Drishtantas are available for observation. But Vedanta looks at this whole creation as an appearance, as a Maya Srishti in the source, in the truth, in the subject. So subject is the material and the universe is Maya Srishti, appearance. So in knowing the source, you come to know the whole appearance to be nothing but the source. It comes to be known. It is as well known means what? It is known to be the very source. When the source is known, the creation too is known as non-separate from the source. That is how it should be put. It is not enough. It is not enough by saying that when the source is known, the creation also becomes as well known. Up to that it is okay, but it's not enough, it's not complete. When the source is known, the creation too becomes known becomes as well known or known to be non-separate from the source. That's the complaint. Ananyatvena jnatam, ananyatvena vijnatam, ena shrutam, ena ashrutam, shrutam bhavati amatam, matam avijnatam, vijnatam. It is not that by knowing ghata, I come to know pata. Aisa nahi. By knowing the mrit, I come to know the ghata to be mrit. To be nothing but, to be non-separate from mrit means to be nothing but mrit. By knowing the clay, I come to know the pots too as nothing but clay. By knowing water, I come to know the waves to be nothing but water. Because knowing water means the only way of knowing water is just knowing it as the source of all the waves. What else? How else can you come? This is something fantastic. Vedanta introduces this kind of, hey, think about this appearance and God as the source. And the source doesn't undergo change to look the appearance. Clay can remain clay and look a pot. That is the Vaidika Dharma. Clay can remain clay and look a pot. Gold can remain gold and look an ornament. Truth can remain truth and look a human being. The unlimited can remain unlimited and look a human being. The unlimited can remain unlimited and look the universe. The problem nahi. And that is what Vedanta conveys. That means there is no problem. If this is exactly what it is, if remaining free, if one looks bound, remaining eternal, if one looks non-eternal, if remaining free from struggle, if one looks a struggler, remaining formless, if one looks a form, that means Jiva has no problem. He has no problem as such. Why? Because he requires only education. He requires education. And therefore, what is relevant to Jiva is only self-education, nothing else. As we saw in the morning classes, a very big thing. Uddesham is only Atma. Vidheyam is Brahmatvam. You cannot have jignasa about anything. Jignasa about anything other than Atma has no validity. Has no validity. ये बात जब तक नहीं समझेंगे तब तक बड़ा मुश्किल है. Atma jignasa is valid because jignasa is valid. You understand, education is valid only about that, about which there is ignorance. You can't have jignasa about something about which you have no ignorance. जिसके बारे में अज्ञान है उसी के बारे में जिज्ञासा इज वैलिड. इतना तक तो समझ में आ गया. We don't have ignorance about the world. World is the appearance in the realm of ignorance about the self. Therefore, अज्ञान का विषय आत्मा. Self is the subject matter of ignorance. Therefore, we don't have too many things of ignorance. We don't have too many things of ignorance. This jagat is not the vishaya of avidya. Vishaya nahi hai. Ye avidya karya hai. Prapancha is not avidya vishayam. Prapancha is avidya karyam in the sense it is a result of ignorance. It's a distortion. It's avidya karya means it's avidya. Jagat is avidya. Self-ignorance is avidya. Self-error is avidya. Therefore, Jagat is avidya. Because I am the body is an error about the self. And I am related to the universe. The universe, appearance of the universe also is an error about the self. Therefore, Jagat is avidya. Dehoham is avidya, Jagat is avidya. Now if Jagat is itself avidya, can you have jignasa about it? If this is avidya, then avidya vishayam is atma. If the subject is the thing about which there is ignorance, the subject is the thing about which there is ignorance, the subject is the thing about which there is an error, then the jignasa can only be valid if it pertains to atma, the subject. Therefore, atma jignasa is valid, any other jignasa is not valid, because you can't have jignasa about avidya karyam. Jignasa about avidya karyam is not valid, even though it is available. People do become curious about the world. People do become curious about matter. One does become curious about chemistry. One does become curious about the world. One does become curious about the body, etc., etc. Curiosity, like the entire science, is the result of man's curiosity. Science is really the result of jignasa. But this jignasa about the world is also avidya, because it is not the subject matter. The world is not the subject matter. The real subject matter is atma. Ye baat really I always try to draw one's attention to this reality, that is atma jignasa alone is valid. Self interest in knowing the subject, education about oneself is valid. Education about everything else is a part of ignorance. That is why aparavidya is avidya. Paravidya is vidya, aparavidya is avidya. Whenever there is opportunity, I tell this. Why you should tell this? Because statements, the memories of what you hear in the class, they have their expiry time. 24 hours is the expiry time. After 24 hours, they need to be renewed, because they expire. Now he gives this, by knowing one, everything becomes known, because it is like this. Look at these empirical examples. Now read. Yatha saumya ekena mritpindena sarvam rinmayam vijñātakam syād vācārambhanam vikāro namadheyam मृत्तिकेत्येव सत्यम यथा सौम्य. Hey Saumya, hey Swetaketu, when I say by knowing one, everything becomes known, I am not really, I'm just making, I'm only stating a simple fact. I'm stating a fact, yes, not exaggeration. Yatha, just as, Saumya, he Swetaketu, ekena mritpindena, ekena, with one. Mritpindena, mrit is clay, pinda means a ball. Generally when you make a pot, you first prepare the mitti, prepare the mrit, and then put it into balls. So अच्छी तरह से ball बना दो, and then this pot maker, whatever, he uses those, that pinda, that balls. Like in order to make roti, you knead the flour and make it into a ball. That is called, that's a pinda. Pinda means some ball like that. Pinda, like when you see pinda danam, when you give pinda to all the Pitris, then it is all in the form of balls. That's called pinda. Mrit pinda means clay ball. Ekena mritpindena. Ekena mritpindena means pindena jnatena. That's how it should be understood. by knowing one clay ball, by knowing one clay. Clay cannot be counted. Clay is only one. It can't be counted, you see. It's not countables. That is, Ekena is not a count, it is not, one, it is not, clay is not one followed by two. Clay is one, not followed by two. You see, there are so many pots made of one clay. And what is that one? It is Ekam and Advitiyam. It is one, not followed by two. When we talk about the mathematics, it is one, and you say one followed by two. Followed by two. But if we really, this even mathematically, as we see in Chandogya, try to understand what I am going to say something. If we can grasp it. You cannot multiply one. You see, Chandogya says Brahman is one, and the situation of the waking state is first pada. The pada of Brahman is not like the feet, go padavat, like a cow has pada. It has first one pada here, another pada, hind legs, etc. It's not like that. Karshapanavatu means like, you have in a 1 rupee, there is a quarter, there's a charana, chavani. See, chavani is useful in Brahma Vidya. Because chavani is useful so much in understanding Brahman, that is why they always used to offer chavani. For every devatas also, what did they used to offer? Chavani. In those days. Anyway, please understand, this 1/4 is within the one. The second 1/4 is within the one. The third 1/4 is within the one. Within the one is 1/4 or 1/3, it doesn't matter. 1/3 is within the one. 1/3 is within the one. 1/3, third 1/3 is also within the one. The one is not divided into three. 1/3 is a kalpita in the one. Because you cannot visualize 1/3 without the one being intact. Without the one being intact, you can't think of 1/3. Even when you cut an apple into 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 3 1/3s, let us say, 3 pieces. Each piece is 1/3 of an apple. I call this 1/3 keeping in view the one. Supposing that one is gone, then it doesn't become 1/3. That means one can never be divided, literally. You can't divide one. You can't divide one. Chandogya says one can't be divided. One can't be multiplied, because even when you say 2, it is again 1. Even if you say 1 plus 1, it is just nothing but 1. Anyway, it is indivisible. Therefore, waking state is kalpita in the one. Dream state is kalpita in the one. And the absence of the two states or the karyakarana bhava is kalpita in the one. And that one is the chaturtha, the truth. that one ekam is the truth. In that manner, we have to understand in Vedanta, whenever we come across the word ekam, it should be taken as the one indivisible one. The indivisible one. And not followed by two. Ekameva advitiyam. Therefore, in the context of the clay and the pots, clay is one. Why? Because, and now please see, I will tell you Chatushpat, how clay is Chatushpat. If Brahman can be every source for Maya Srishti is Chatushpat. Haji. Clay in relation to the pots is Chatushpat. To look a pot is one pada. To look at the memory, to look at another pot like the dream, to look at another pot, subtler pot, let us say, is another pada. And to be treated as the source of both is the third pada. And to be clay without a second is a fourth. Is it not true? Is not water Chatushpat to the waves? To look a wave is first pada. To look a subtler wave, I am just using that subtler wave is, you can say unmanifest wave, it doesn't matter. Subtler wave is second pada. To be described as the source of the wave is the third pada. And therefore there is ananyatvam of the wave with water, and the water as water unqualified by wave, unqualified by the karyakarana bhava. Water as water is the fourth. Therefore, he is not the karanam of Maya Srishti. Anywhere there is karyakarana bhava, anywhere there is mayika karyakarana bhava, there is Chatushpatvam. Yes. Therefore, water in relation to the waves, water is Chatushpat. In relation to the pots, clay is Chatushpat. In relation to the universe, the three states, in relation to the life and death, Brahman is Chatushpat. Therefore, Chatushpatvam. Chatushpat. See, if there is, if mrit and clay and pots and golden ornaments and the iron and the instruments, they are all given as drishtantas for Brahman. Then understand, even they have to be given as drishtantas for Chatushpatvam. Yes. I will give you another example. To look a snake. To look a snake is one pada of Rajju. And to look the unmanifest snake is the second pada. And to be the truth of both, the source of both, is the third pada. And to be rope without a second is the fourth. Within that rope, the fourth is kalpita, the sarpatvam. Within that one, the rope is kalpita, the unmanifest sarpatvam. Within that rope, the one is karyakarana bhava kalpitam. If karyam is kalpita, karanatvam also is kalpita. And that one is unqualified by none of them. And rope as rope is Chaturtha. Is not the Chatushpatvam evident? Is not the Chatushpatvam. Therefore, unless one understands the Chatushpatvam of clay, Chatushpatvam of water, Chatushpatvam means having that four padas. Chatushpatvam in clay, the way how the clay is Chatushpat, how the water is Chatushpat, how the rope is Chatushpat. You can't really. Then you start, unless you understand that, one will imagine Chatushpat Mahabrahman. It is the very conscious being the subject, which is not kalpita, which is the truth, in which a situation of being a waker is kalpitam, a situation of being a dreamer is kalpitam, karika and bhava is kalpitam, and the subject, the aparoksham, is akalpitam, and that akalpitam means the one, and therefore the one third are kalpita in the one, and one is not divided. One is not divided into three padas. One is not divided into three padas. Alright, the moment we use the word Chatushpat, for a layman, what comes to the mind? One is divided into four. Aur kya? Go Padavati. 4 quarters. Divisible. Then gone, that particular, us jivan ke liye gone. Therefore, truth and error relationship is never understood. Okay. Yatha saumya ekena mritpindena, by understanding the ekatvam of the clay, sarvam mrinmayam, all that is made of clay. By knowing one clay, all that is made of clay, vijñātikam sya, comes to be understood. By knowing clay, all that is made of clay comes to be known as nothing but clay. That should be understood. By knowing clay, if I know clay, then I also come to know. If I know what is clay, then I also come to know that all that is made of clay is nothing but clay. But this is a common sense. If I come to know clay, then all that is made of clay, also if I come to know as nothing but clay, then why do we have 2 words? Clay and pot. If pot also is clay, then why do we call pot a pot? Because pot should be called clay, but we call pot. If pot is clay, then nobody calls pot clay. Everybody calls pot. Everybody calls wave. Nobody calls water. Even when he calls water, that is only a different, but then first having called it wave, then he says, of course it's made of water. But still it is a wave. One calls wave, one calls bubble, one calls breaker, tidal wave. So there are different language, different words. If pot is clay, then why do I call it pot? तो बहुत बड़ी बात है जी. If pot is clay, why do I call pot a pot? Shruti says, ये है वाचारंभणम विकारो नामधेयम. Yes, it is true, it is clay, but yet really there is a notion, vacharambanam, it is only called. Why do I call? See, if pot is clay, then why do I call it pot? For which the Shruti says, you only call it pot. There is no reason. You only call it pot. It's ever remaining clay. Vacharambhanam. Vikaraha, the creation. Vacharambhanam means it is only just a vacha arabhyate iti vacharambhanam. Started by your tongue. Just a word. Vikaraha means, please don't translate it as modification. Translate vikara as creation. What we call pot, the creation, what we call creation, is just a word, is a name. Creation is only a name. Vikara. Now here spend little time. Vikara means creation. Vikara means creation. The Shruti says creation is only a word. Vacharambhanam. One word is creation, another word is creation. Any creation, Maya Srishti, any creation involving no change, that creation is only a word. And the moment we say it is only a word, we have to bring in, it is only a thought. It is only a word means it is only a thought. It is only a notion. Shabda and pratyaya go together. I look upon it as something else, something extra, something in excess of clay. I look upon pot as something in excess of clay. I look upon pot as something in excess of clay. To think of pot as something in excess of clay, that thinking is called pratyaya. That thinking is called pratyaya. Thinking of the pot as something in excess of clay, or thinking of pot as something different from clay, or in excess of clay, that thinking is called pratyaya, and in true to that thinking there is a word called pot. Therefore, that it is in excess of clay, that it is in excess of clay is a thinking, is a thought, is a notion, and for which there is a word that is called vacharambhanam vikaraha namadheyam. Vacharambhanam means started by tongue. Namadheyam means just a word. Nama means just a word, just a name. Vikaraha means creation. Creation is nothing but a name, started by the tongue. Creation is nothing but a word. Creation is nothing but a word. I would like to put it. Creation is nothing but a word. And once we say word, then it is nothing but a thought. And a thought means it is just a notion. A notion means a correctable notion. It is not just a thought, it is a correctable notion. That the pot is something in excess of clay is a correctable notion. That the pot is something in excess. Now some people argue, oh my God, if pot is not something in excess of clay, then why don't you fetch water through clay? Why don't you fetch water through clay? Why don't you carry clay and then fetch water? So therefore pot has to be accepted as something in excess of clay. In this manner some people argue that is not. I say, what we are saying is, because pot is useful for fetching water, clay is not useful for fetching water, clay as clay, therefore pot must be accepted to be something in excess of clay. This is no Vedanta. What we are saying is, despite the scene, despite the view that it is something, different from clay, that it is something in excess of clay, it is not in excess of clay. Despite the perception that it is useful as opposed to the clay, but still despite its dissimilarity, despite the dissimilarity between pot and clay, despite the dissimilarity between pot as pot and clay ball, despite the dissimilarity, pot is still clay. That is Vedanta. Despite pot being useful, despite the pot being useful as opposed to the clay that is not useful for fetching water, it is still clay. It's like, this particular point, इतना आसान में से समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. We always try to, what Vedanta is saying is, despite the pot is looking in excess of clay, despite pot looking in excess of clay, despite the ornament looking in excess of gold, in fact it is It is not in excess of gold. It is just nothing but gold. That is Vedanta. I can't bring water through clay. I can't bring water through a clay ball. I can only bring water only through a pot. Therefore, pot में कुछ अतिशय है, कुछ है उसमें, इसमें जो clay में नहीं है, जो pot में है. Therefore, we have to accept pot as something in excess of clay. Aisa, that is not Vedanta. Vedanta says, despite that Srishti, despite that Maya Srishti, it is still clay. We trace the creation. Yes, there is creation. That is not other than the source. If you say in excess of clay, clay being reality, there should be another excess reality. But there is no excess reality, excess clay. In the same manner, I can't wear gold. Gold, lumps of gold. Gold biscuits you can't wear. You can't wear gold biscuits, but you have to wear ornaments. Because I can't wear gold, I can only wear ornaments. Therefore, ornaments are indeed in excess of gold. Can you say that? It looks as though it is in excess. But despite that form, it is still nothing but gold. This universe looks in excess of awareness. This universe looks in excess of the seer. The seen looks in excess of the seer, but it is not in excess of the seer. The dream world looks in excess of the dreamer, the seer. The dream world looks in excess of the seer of the dream, but it is not in excess of the seer. If it is in excess of the seer of the dream, then really it just resolves unto the seer. What resolves unto the seer is not in excess of the seer. It's a peculiar thing. This vacharambanam vikaro namadheyam. These three words must be, you have to reflect upon. Vikaraha, you have to put the sentence like this. Vikaraha, creation. Namadheyam is a mere word. Vacharambanam, started by the tongue, is a statement. Vikaraha, creation. What is a creation? Creation is a word. Creation is only just a word. You call it a pot, but it is a clay. Remaining clay, it is called a pot. Then it makes it. Now it's like, you see, there is pot. You take away the clay, you call it pot, and remove the clay. Then what is left? Only a word. Only a word, pot. Pot minus clay is only a word. There is nothing. Therefore, vikaraha is a definition. What is creation? Creation is a word started by a tongue, uttered by a tongue. If creation is a word uttered by a tongue, then we have to just make it complete. Creation is a word and a notion. Creation is a notion for which there is a word. Because I look upon it as something little different from clay. I look upon it in excess of clay. I look upon pot in excess of clay. In excess means something additional. Kuch hai, kuch hua hai. Clay alone remains. Clay doesn't remain clay. Clay remains clay plus something kuch hua hai. Kuch hua hai. That kuch hua hai. That is what is called looking upon it in excess of clay. And then I call it a pot. But what Vedanta says, despite pot looking in excess of clay, despite pot being viewed in excess of clay, the truth is it is not in excess of clay, in fact it is clay. Vajarambhanam vikaram namadheyam, and the last phrase is Mrittika ityeva satyam. Clay alone is the truth. Clay alone is the truth. That it is pot is false. Its identity, its look, my notion that it is in excess of clay is mithya. It's called mithya jnana. There is no false thing, there is a false notion. There is nothing false. All that is there is only clay, because what I am seeing is clay. What I touch, when I touch, I am touching clay. When I taste, I am tasting clay. I am smelling clay. Everything is nothing but clay. Therefore, there is no false thing there. I am thinking of pot as something in excess of clay. That thinking of it in excess of clay is called mithya. That thinking, if it is mithya, it is called mithya jnana, false knowledge. And the truth is what? That it is only clay, that it is not in excess of clay. Pot is only clay, not in excess of clay. Pot is only clay, not in excess of clay. Pot is only clay, not something other than clay. Neither it is something other than clay, nor it is something in excess of clay, nor is it modification of clay. Nor is it a modification of clay. It is clay, because clay remains clay. There is no parinama. It is not in excess of clay. It is not other than clay. It is not a modification of clay. It is clay. This universe is not in excess of the subject. It is not other than the subject. It is not also a modification of awareness. The object of awareness is not in excess of awareness. What is dreamt is not in excess of the dreamer. Oh, badi baat hai. Hey Rama. Sansara is not in excess of moksha. Sansara is not in excess of moksha. Sansara is a Maya Srishti in moksha. Yes, Lee. This is called Thos Vedanta. You understand Thos Vedanta? This is called Thos Vedanta means what? We get down to the topic. This sansara, this whole Srishti is not in excess of freedom. It is an appearance within freedom. It is a notion within. Bondage is a notion within freedom. Bondage is a notion. Bondage is a notion. Freedom is the nature. Our nature, we are by nature free and by notion bound. Okay, this is over. Ityeva Sat. So Uddalaka tells Swetaketu, hey, by knowing one clay, you come to know all the pots to be nothing but clay. You don't conclude, then what happens by knowing that the pot is nothing? All that is made of clay is indeed nothing but clay. What is the benefit? Aram se sunna. What is the benefit? All that is made of clay is nothing but clay. What is the benefit? The idea that it is in excess of clay, the idea that it is other than clay, the idea that it is the modification of clay, which are all distortions, come to an end. Similarly, here also, this Srishti is something is not in excess of Brahma, nor is it modification of the subject, nor is it in excess of the subject, nor it is other than the subject. These are the problems. They come to an end. What I see is not in excess of me. What I see is not other than me. What I see is not in excess of me. What I see is not a quality of me. And what I see is not a change of me. Thus, what I see is nothing but me. Ananyatvam. What I see is non-separate from the seer. In this manner, the seer, when he understands his actual identity, what is the benefit? He becomes liberated from the idea that he is a jiva. He is liberated from the jiva. And therefore, hey Swetaketu, just as the knowledge of the clay liberates one from all the misconceptions about the clay, by knowing the one, the source, one comes to know everything to be nothing but that one source. Now please see the bhashya. I hope I have covered some important points. He Saumya Yatha Loke, He Saumya, He Swetaketu, Yatha Loke, just as in this world, Ekena Mritpindena, by knowing one clay ball, one clay, Ekena Mritpindena, all that is made of clay, like what? Karaka, Kumbhadi. Karaka, Kumbha. These are all various, pots of various sizes. The jar and the pot, etc. Kumbha means a huge one. Karaka means small one. It is called Karaka Kumbhadi. Karana Bhutena as the source. So knowing the clay means knowing it to be clay and also knowing it to be the source of all of it. Here we all miss out. Knowing the clay means knowing the clay as clay, that it is by identity clay. I come to know the identity of clay as clay. I also come to know that it is this clay that is the material for all the pots, etc. That is called knowing. And here there is something very fantastic. Knowing it to be the source of everything, knowing it to be the source of the pot, etc. is called prakriya. Did you hear the whole sentence? Very difficult. To draw your attention to every sentence is very difficult. Knowing the clay to be the source of the pot, etc. is called the prakriya. And knowing it to be clay as clay, unqualified, etc. is the tatparya. One. Clear? In this manner, when one gets the jnanam about the clay, prakriya as well as the tatparyam, all about the prakriya and the tatparyam about the clay, then what happens? Bhutena vijñātena, when that is understood, sarvam anyat, sarvam everything, anyat the other, vikara jatam the creations, mrinmayam, mrinmayam means mrin vikaram, mrinmayam made of mrit, mritmayam, mrinmayam, mrit vikara jatam. Vijñātam syat comes to be known. By knowing clay, one comes to know all that is made of clay. And why does one come to know the clay? Why does one come to know all that is made of clay by knowing the clay? Because all that is made of clay is made of clay involving change. That is the punch. By knowing milk, you cannot know the curd. Because the properties of the milk are different from the properties of the curd. Wherever there is change, this eka vijñānena, well, sarvam vijñātam bhavati, this particular statement doesn't work. Where there is karikarana bhava, where there is modification, change. By knowing the milk, you come to know the curd is wrong. It doesn't work. By knowing milk, one comes to know the curd is wrong because you can't reduce, you can't say, this is milk, you can't say. I can't recognize I can't look at the curd and then make a statement, this is non-separate from milk. I can't do badha of curd. I can't reduce curd to milk. I can't say milk is the satyam and the curd is mithya. Can you say that? No. That is why this is Maya Srishti. Wherever there is Maya Srishti, then this particular statement works. By knowing the one, you come to know everything. Now he asks a question. Katham mritpinde karane vijñāte. How by knowing the one clay? Karyam anyat vijñātam syāt. How does one come to know all that is made of clay as nothing but clay? How? By knowing clay, how does one come to know all that is made of clay as clay? By knowing the mrit, how does one come to know the mrit vikaram as mrit? Naisha doshaha. Bhashyakara says there is no flaw in this. Why? Karanena ananyatvat karyasya. This is an unfoldment. Because the creation is non-separate from the source. When the creation is non-separate from the source, the knowledge of the source also amounts to the knowledge of the creation as nothing but the source. Karanena ananyatvat karyasya. Yan manyase, what you think. Anyasmin vijñāte anyan na jayate iti. Hey Purvapakshi, you said something. By knowing one thing, the other need not be known. By knowing the cow, I come to know only a cow. I cannot know the horse. Or by knowing the horse, I come to know only the horse, not a cow. By knowing A, I come to know only A, not B. By knowing B, I come to know only B, not A. And this kind of thinking is absolutely right. What you are saying is right. It is true. That is how this world is. By knowing a given object, you come to know only that given object, not anything else. That is true. Satyam evam syat. It is indeed true. Yadi anyat karanat karyam syat. If the creation were different from the source. If creation were different from the source, like a cow is different from the horse, cow is different from the horse, because there is a difference, cow is not the horse, horse is not the cow, therefore by knowing the horse, I don't come to know the cow, and by knowing the cow, I don't know the horse, by knowing the horse, I don't know the cow. In that manner, the creation I would never know by knowing the source if the creation were separate. If the creation were separate from the source, then I would never know the creation by knowing the source. But is there a difference between the creation and the source? Here, see, simple thinking. It's such a wonderful, lucid. The Bhashyakara says, what you say would be right, provided there is a distinction, difference between the source and the creation. Satyamevam syat yadi anyat karanat karyam syat. Natu evam anyat karanat karyam. But in this manner, the karanat karyam na anyat. The creation is not separate from the source. Hey, if the creation is not separate from the source, that means it's clear the knowledge of the source would be knowledge. All right. Here, there is another small little thing you can think. Okay, by knowing the source, you say you come to know the creation, but why can't we say like this? By knowing the creation, you come to know the source. It doesn't work. This is the problem. Karya jnanam need not amount to karana jnanam. Do you know what is karya jnanam? Karya jnanam is nothing but karyam. Karya jnanam is what? Karyam, that means the knowledge of the pot. Knowledge that it is pot is called the Karya Jnanam. That it is pot is called Karya Jnanam. That it is pot doesn't give me the knowledge that it is made of the clay. The knowledge, the perception of the universe doesn't include the knowledge of the source. The perception of the universe does not imply also the understanding about the source. Therefore, Karana Jnanam amounts to Karya Jnanam. Karya Jnanam does not amount to Karana Jnanam, because Karya Jnanam is, there is no such thing. Karya Jnanam means what? Seeing the Srishti. Seeing the Srishti doesn't amount to seeing the source. And therefore, Karya Jnanam does not lead to Karana Jnanam, but Karana Jnanam leads to Karya. That means Aparavidya doesn't amount to Paravidya, but Paravidya includes entire Aparavidya. Therefore, Syanatu evam anyat karanat karyam. Then just last few minutes. Katham tarhi, then how sir? Katham tarhi then, katham how? Idam, this, loke, how does this take place in this world? Loke, in this world, people always refer to these two things like this. Idam karanam, this is the cause, this is the source. Ayamasya vikaraha, and this is the creation. If they are not two things, why do people refer to these things as two? This is the clay, this is the pot. That means what? Two. This is the clay, this is the pot. They have a language for the source, they have a language for the creation. And they make a reference, one reference to the source, another reference to the creation. If they are not two separate things, if the source and creation are not two separate things, then why do people make two references? In answer to this, Bhashyakara is going to say, I am not denying the reference. I don't say the world doesn't make two references. But one reference is the truth, the other reference is mithya. The reference to the clay is the satyam. The other reference, what we call this is pot, this is creation, this is only vacharamanam vikaro namadheyam. They are not two realities. This is going to unfold, I think, in the coming few lines that we will see in the coming class. Om Purnamada